Okay, let's talk about a story that, seriously, has it all. We've got a hero with superhuman strength, some seriously gruesome monsters, and even a dragon guarding a massive, cursed treasure. Yep, we're diving into Beowulf, the foundational epic of the English language and, you could say, the original monster-hunting blockbuster. So you might be thinking, what could a story that's over 1,000 years old, written in a language we can barely even recognize, possibly have in common with the superheroes we see on screen today? Well, you'd be surprised. As we're about to find out, the DNA of pretty much every modern hero's journey was forged in the fire and darkness of this ancient poem. All right, so let's paint a picture of this world. I want you to imagine 6th century Scandinavia. This isn't a land of big organized kingdoms, not at all. It's a world of warrior tribes, all living in this constant state of tension with each other. And at the heart of each community, there's the mead hall. Think of it as the one safe place, full of light, warmth, and community. But just outside those walls, out there in the swamps and the dark, that's where the monsters are, and they're always lurking. So the structure of the poem, it's actually brilliantly simple but totally epic. It's all about one legendary hero, Beowulf, and the 3 massive, terrifying challenges he has to face. These are the fights that will define his entire life and, of course, his legacy. So, his journey is broken into 3 parts. First up, he battles Grendel, this monstrous outcast who's been terrorizing a Danish king's mead hall for years. But that's just the beginning. Next, he has to face Grendel's mother, who is, believe it or not, even more terrifying. She comes roaring out of her swampy lair, and she is all about revenge. And then finally, many years later, when he's an old king himself, he has to face a fire-breathing dragon. It's the ultimate final test of his courage. Now here's something that's really hard for us to imagine today. For centuries, Beowulf wasn't a book. You couldn't just go pick it up and read it. It was a performance. It was an oral story sung by poets. They were called skops in these smoky mead halls, probably with a harp playing in the background. It was passed down from one generation to the next just by memory and word of mouth. And this timeline really puts it all into perspective. Just look at this. The events in the story, they're set way back in 6th century Scandinavia. But the poem itself wasn't actually composed and sung until centuries later in Anglo-Saxon England by people looking back on their ancestral homeland. And get this, it was only written down for the first time around the year 1000 by Christian monks. And it wasn't even really published like a modern book until 1815. That massive gap in time is what creates this really fascinating cultural mashup inside the story. Yeah, that cultural mix is everything. The whole poem is this incredible blend of 2 totally different worldviews that are constantly clashing with each other. On one hand, you've got the old pagan warrior code, this belief in an inescapable fate, the absolute duty of vengeance, and the idea that winning glory before you die is the most important thing. But then, on the other hand, you have the Christian monks who actually wrote the story down. And they wove their own beliefs into it, right? So you see references to God the Creator, and they even frame the monster Grendel as a direct descendant of Cain from the Bible. It creates this amazing tension right there in the text. Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into those core warrior values. Because to really get Beowulf, you have to understand what motivated an Anglo-Saxon hero. And it wasn't just about, being a good guy. It was all about building a name for yourself that would outlast your own death. And right at the very center of their worldview was this concept called Wyrd. That's W-Y-R-D. It basically means fate. But don't think of it as just some vague idea. For them, it was like your entire life was an unchangeable script that was already written. Wyrd decided everything. Who won a battle, the exact moment you were going to die. You couldn't change the script. No way. But what you could do was choose how you played your part. And for a hero, the goal was always to face that fate with absolute courage. So, what held their society together? It was this thing called commoditas. Think of it as the ultimate warrior's code of loyalty. It was this unbreakable bond between a lord and his warriors. Here's how it worked. The lord gave out treasure. He offered protection. He gave you a seat in his hall. But in return, his warriors gave him absolute, unquestioning loyalty. We're talking fighting and dying for him if that's what it took. To break that bond, that was the worst thing you could possibly do. The ultimate shame. And this quote from the poem just sums it all up perfectly. Let whoever can win glory before death. When a warrior is gone, that will be his best and only bulwark. I mean, think about it. In a world where they didn't really have a solid belief in a happy afterlife, Your reputation, your glory, was the only part of you that could become immortal. It was the only thing standing between you and just being completely forgotten by time. And the language they used is just so cool. It totally reflects this warrior world. The poets used the special trick called a kenning, which is basically a compound metaphor, like a poetic nickname. So they wouldn't just say the sea. No, that's boring. They'd call it the whale road. A king wasn't just a king, he was a ring giver, because that was his job, to hand out treasure rings to his loyal warriors. These kennings just make the whole poem so much more vivid and, well, easier to remember when you're telling it from memory. So that brings up a huge question, right? If this was a spoken story for hundreds of years, how in the world do we even have it today? Well, the answer is an absolutely incredible, almost unbelievable survival story, all about one single, very fragile manuscript. And I really want this to sink in. Every single translation of Beowulf you've ever seen, every movie, every comic book, it all comes from this one book known as the Nowell Codex. It is the only surviving medieval manuscript of the poem in the entire world. If this one book hadn't made it, the story would just be gone, lost to history forever. And believe me, its journey was anything but easy. Back in 1731, a massive fire broke out in the library where the manuscript was being kept. The book itself, which was part of a collection with the catchy name Cotton Vitellius A15, was actually saved, but it got badly burned all around the edges. Over the years, the charred pages started to crumble, and bits of words and letters were just lost. Today, this incredibly precious, damaged artifact is carefully preserved in the British Library. It's a treasure that barely survived to tell its tale. But despite almost being wiped from existence, Beowulf's influence is, well, it's pretty much immeasurable. It is, without a doubt, the blueprint for so much of the fantasy genre that we all know and love today. I mean, look, if you have ever read The Lord of the Rings or seen the movies, you have already experienced the legacy of Beowulf. J.R.R. Tolkien wasn't just some casual fan. He was one of the world's leading Beowulf scholars. Think about it. The Fellowship of Warriors, the Great Mead Hall of Rohan, the huge battle with the treasure-hoarding dragon like Smaug, all of that is pulled directly from the pages of this ancient Anglo-Saxon epic. In fact, it's not an exaggeration to say that Tolkien pretty much single-handedly rescued the poem's reputation. For a long, long time, academics kind of looked down on Beowulf. They saw it as just a primitive, historical curiosity. They thought the monsters were, well, a little silly. But then, in this game-changing essay in 1936, Tolkien argued that the monsters weren't a flaw at all. They were the very heart of the poem. His revolutionary idea was that you need the monsters to force the characters and us to confront these huge themes of courage and death. He's the one who made the world see Beowulf for the masterpiece it is. All right, so after all that, after more than 1,000 years, why should we still care about Beowulf? Why does this ancient monster story still matter today? Well, because it is so much more than just a story. For one, it's literally the beginning of English literature. It's also this priceless window into a lost warrior world. It gives us the original blueprint for the hero, the one who leaves the safety of the firelight to go out and fight the monsters in the dark. And maybe most importantly, it deals with these timeless questions about courage, loyalty, and what it really means to face your own mortality. And I want to leave you with one final thought, something the poem itself hints at, but never quite answers. Think about it. To defeat a monster like Grendel, Beowulf doesn't use a sword. He uses his bare hands, matching the creature's own brute strength. In a way, both the hero and the monster are outsiders, set apart from normal people by their immense, terrifying power. So it leaves us with this really critical question. In the process of hunting and destroying monsters, how close does a hero come to becoming a monster himself?